Hi everyone, nice to see you here. And today this is going to be a slightly unusual legal talk because most of the compliance sessions at the game dev conferences is like following the same format. Here is the regulation, here is the fine, and here is the way how to avoid it. And I want to make this session more practical and highlight how all these changes in D2C change the decision that you are making every day, which market to enter, whether to launch a web shop, and how the payments work and all of this. This matters right now because the D2C landscape changes in the last 12 years more than in the last 5 years. So here is the plan. I'll walk you through how the D2C looks like legally right now in the European Union, in the UK, and in Asia. I'll cover monetization, subscription, payments, because once you go direct, the payments become the setup that matters for you. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Natalia. I'm working at Xsolla for more than 10 years already. It's 11. And I lead the legal team located globally. And I'm here talking to you about the regulation because I believe that legal infrastructure and commercial expansion is the same problem right now. But first, let me start with the headline. You all know that a few weeks ago, Apple asked the US Supreme Court to grant an emergency relief over the litigation on external commission, but the court declined to grant a stay. And today, Apple is not enforcing commission collection in the US for the linked out purchases in the United States, but this is still ongoing and the lower courts are working on the final framework. This is the real shift, but the narrative that platforms are losing, this is too simple and the reality is more complicated. So the old universal structure of 30% and 15% is breaking into regional models. In mainland China in 2026, Apple reduced its commission from 30% to 25%. In the EU, the Digital Market Act pushed it to the more complicated structure. External purchases may still carry Apple fees, including acquisition fees, store service fees, and in some cases, technology fees. And also Japan moved differently, and in Japan, Apple issued the Japan-specific terms depending on whether you use Apple payments or third-party PSP. So the platform fees did not disappear, but the simple structure disappeared. Google is shifting too. Following the antitrust pressure and settlement activity, Google announced the revised fee structure for the parts of European economic areas in the US and in the UK. So some transactions move closer to 20% and some move closer to 10%. The number that matters is not the headline platform fee, but the effective cost of the transaction. This is not only a D2C issue, because recently Google changed the way how the chargeback risk is allocated within the platform billing. And it was just recently, and now when a player disputes the Play Store transaction, then with the bank, then the developer is responsible for chargeback fees, and Google's liability is limited only to their service cost. So when you move outside the platform billing, your platform fee might drop, but the other work move onto your side of the table. For example, VAT, value-added tax, was a separate economic layer, but with Apple and Google, they cover that within their platform. But once you go direct, you need to think about that, do it yourself, or work with someone who does. The key takeaway here is that there is no single playbook for all the world right now. For example, in the European Union, this is the most regulated driven market. Developer protection is strongest here, and Digital Market Act reshaping the platform economics. In the US is a highly favorable right now around external payments, but the long-term structure is still being fought in court. APAC is really different. The issue there is not only platform fee, because even if you go outside Apple or Google, you need to think about local rules. For example, game licensing in Vietnam, game classification in India, age verification in Brazil, and several other markets. So D2C does not mean one single checkout. It means more control, but more local responsibility as well. I want to spend a moment on Russia because recently, based on the government demand, now Apple payments are restricted in Russia. And this is a sensitive topic, but if you'd like to talk about that, we can meet at our tent here and discuss that more. Let's now move on the loot boxes. Belgium has treated the loot boxes as a gambling for years right now, and penalty can reach 800K per violation with potential criminal exposure. Brazil moved recently too. Under the new law that is in force starting March 2026, if your game has the loot boxes and you have children as your users, then you should restrict these games for the children. And fines can reach 10% of the Brazil revenue. Also in South Korea, since 2024, there is a requirement to have item-based disclosure probability. But regulators now is looking at that, and there are so many new fines in South Korea related to the loot boxes, so you have to be really careful with that. Also, rating framework is changing. PIGI covers more than 35 countries in Europe. And recently, starting this year, PIGI announced that they have new rating criteria for randomized item practices. And now, if you are submitting your game to be certified under PIGI, you will receive, with loot boxes, you will receive the rating PIGI 16 or PIGI 18. So this is changing also. Now let's talk about the US development. In February 2026, New York Attorney General brought a case against a huge game developer about the loot boxes in the high-profile game. I will not name the game developer because the point here is the legal theory. This case is because not just about probability disclosures, but the allegation here is that the loot boxes and the item that is received from these loot boxes can be traded on the secondary market. So now, probably, the regulator will ask you not just about probability disclosures, but also what your user can do with the item after they receive it from the loot boxes. Another changes is automatic renewal law in New York. Because before we talk about monetization, and now let's talk about checkout and subscriptions. So in New York, before any automatic renewal starts, user needs to get clear disclosures about that, and they need to actively consent to that. Also, if the pricing or material terms change, customer need to get an advance notice. Also, long-term subscriptions need to have advance notice and renewal reminders. And also, the main thing here is that the cancellation should be as easy as sign up. Let's now move to the near future, 3 weeks from now. This is really important. Starting June 19, 2026, there is a new directive in the US saying that if you are selling digital services to the European clients, you need to have visible withdrawal button on your website and user flow. Also, this is not just about the withdrawal button, this is also about the process. So starting June 2026, your user should click on that button, and then you should send them email acknowledgement that you received this notice. And this applies to all European customers. Even if you are not from the US, you still need to have this button. And penalties for the absence of that button can reach 4% of your annual turnover. So now let's talk about where this withdrawal button applies. Withdrawal button applies only for the cases where withdrawal right exists. So the first question is not where to put that button, but whether your transactions still carry a withdrawal right. So you can look at the slide, and if your game has the features like premium online access or cloud gaming, for these cases, you should have that button, and you should have that starting June 19. So it's 3 weeks from now. Now, Vietnam. Vietnam right now has more than 54 million users. So this is a serious market, and regulation is serious there too. The regulation about licensed entity or working with a licensed partner, this is something kind of old, existed in Vietnam. But what changed is that Vietnamese banks already rejecting payments to unlicensed platform. So Vietnam, this is something really important, but something really difficult. India is the freshest on that list. There is new operational framework that came into force on May 2026. So according to the new Indian regulations, all the games are divided into 3 categories. The first category is online money game. What is online money game? This is the game with the stake of money or payment fee with the expectation of the monetary return. And this is something that is now prohibited in India. The second category is esports games. If you have esports game, you need to be registered in India under the specific authority called Online Gaming Authority. And only with that you can operate compliantly in India. And third category is social games. Social games is permitted, everything is fine with that. The issue here is that payment processing for prohibited categories can be blocked at the financial level. So the first question here is simple. Which of these 3 categories your game falls into? Let's now talk about much hyped topic, which is dark patterns. So under the UK Digital Markets Competition and Consumer Act, the DMCC, that came into force in April 2025, this act prohibits drip pricing and misleading countdown timers. In the first year, the UK authorities reviewed hundreds of games and sent many corrective requests. Also, this year, the first huge fine landed in the amount of 4.2 million. This is not about gaming company, and no gaming company has been fined yet, but the word yet, what is matters here. South Korea with dark partners moved in parallel. There was an amendment to E-Commerce Act in force starting last year, and they prohibit some dark patterns with the huge fine. And also, all of you know that in Q4 2026, European Union Digital Fairness Act is expected to be published. And according to that act, certain dark partners will be prohibited as well. So many games should review their monetization mechanics. South Korea again. South Korea deserves its own section because it's probably the clearest indicator of where the legislation is heading right now. Mandatory item level probability disclosure, this is something that is in force starting 2022. But recently, Korean Fair Trade Commission sanctioned 2 game companies for randomized item practices. And the case here was that not just about probability disclosures because they existed, but the authority checked whether these probabilities are matches with the practice. Also in Korea, they launched South Korea probability-based item victim relief center, which is a unified channel for all loot boxes practices. So can you imagine that there is a specific regulator for the loot boxes? I cannot imagine. And the direction here is still tightening. Next, let's talk about child protection. So now, if children are using your product should be designed for that reality. And enforcement is already happening. In March 2025, European Commission started a case against Star Stable Entertainment for hidden prices and timers targeting children. There is no final penalty yet, but the position of the Commission is open. And what they said that if your dark patterns exploits children behavior, then this is a consumer protection issue. Brazil also moved on that, and starting March 2026, if your game has some randomized practices and mechanics, it should be restricted for children. Also, they restricted self-declaration of the age, and if you are selling to Brazil children, you need to send reports to the compliance authority, and also you need to assign a legal representative here. Also, Florida. In Florida, there is an active enforcement in place, and the purpose is to protect children from addictive design mechanics. So the direction with child protection is very clear all over the world, and this is about age assurance, parental control, safer monetization. I just walk you through changes in the several countries, and you can see now that D2C does not remove legal complexity, but it changes where this complexity sits. And studios cannot do this alone, because can you imagine that you need to assign legal representative in Brazil and do all that I just listed? This is very hard. That's why Xsolla can help you with that. We act as a merchant of record, which means that we are responsible for payments, compliance, refunds, chargebacks, anti-fraud. On payments, Xsolla supports more than 1,000 payment methods. On age verification, we have parental control flows. We can help you with Brazil and their age verification. On loot boxes, we are doing onboarding review of your products with the guidance. Of course, this is not a legal compliance guarantee, but this is still a nice guidance for the studios. And also today, more than 700 web shops run globally on Xsolla infrastructure. And also, we have Xsolla World Map, and the link you can see in the slide. This is an interactive map that covers more than 200 territories around payments, tax, data privacy. We did not touch data privacy because this is something really important. And on that Xsolla World Map, you can also find local platform realities and cultural consideration. So feel free to use that. 2 years ago, Xsolla's legal team, we published global regulation overview, and we named the Brazil law as a proposal. And now this is in force, and the fine can reach million. So we were tracking that development long before it became a mainstream. This is how our legal function at Xsolla operates, not a department reviewing the problems after the fact, but as a part of the infrastructure that allows expansion to happen in the first place. So I want to leave you today with two things: the opportunity and the reality. The D2C opportunity is real. In several regions, D2C is more open than it has ever been. But the reality is that these rules change. The rules change as fast as the opportunity. So the question is not whether to go D2C, but the question is whether to build payments, legal, tax infrastructure yourself, or partner with us, because we have all the things for you. Thank you.